you know, just to hear a mom kind of talk about their experience. And the reality is that no one can watch their child 100% of the time, 100% supervision. And so, there's this stigma, I think, around, well, I watch my child around water, or we're careful around water. Well, they were obviously careful as well. But, kids are drawn to water, they're curious, and they, he slipped out of the room. So we have 3,500 to 4,000 drownings occur every year in the U.S. Drowning is the leading cause of death for children 5 and under. For kids 1 to 14, it's the second. It's number 2. An average of 3 kids drown every day in the U.S. In Texas, we lost 76 kids in 2022 to drowning. It was the same in 2021. That's a pretty consistent statistic. And what's interesting about these statistics, after I looked at them, is it excludes a lot of drownings. So if you go to the next slide, every time for every fatal drowning, there's 8 kids that have a near drowning. Okay, they end up, and 50% of those kids that get rushed to the ER are hospitalized. Normally, kids that go into the hospital, about 6% are hospitalized. But with drowning incidents, it's 50% of those kids are hospitalized. Now, if that child is hospitalized and then they have heart failure, while they're being hospitalized, that death is categorized as heart failure, not drowning. So when you think about the 50% of these 8 children that are hospitalized, if there's a complication in the hospital that causes, so the drowning statistics are probably actually low compared to what is actually happening. And then also just with non-fatal drownings, after between 4 and 6 minutes, there's likely permanent brain damage due to the lack of oxygen. And so just being aware that how quickly, a very life-altering situation can happen. This is a news story. I want you to see the video that's in it because it's very informative, and you'll see it in in the points I'm going to make. So is it going to load? Okay.
But we begin with that near drowning at a local hotel pool. Good evening to you. I'm Dave Llewellyn.
And I'm Carolyn Clifford. A 2-year-old boy sinks to the bottom with more than a dozen other people around. But thanks to some heroes, he manages to survive.
7 Action News reporter Anu Prakash shows us more of that harrowing video and tells us what happened in this story, which you'll see only on 7.
Police say that little boy is okay, but even so, we do want to warn you, the video is tough to watch. It's Friday night, January 24th. What starts out as a fun evening at this Livonia hotel pool takes a horrifying turn. Watch the highlighted box. Police say that's a 2-year-old boy in the water struggling to stay afloat.
Look at all the people.
He's trying to swim. I think he's trying to get in a position to get upright, and he just can't. And there's a lot of people in the pool. They're playing, and I think he gets lost in the confusion.
Within moments, the toddler sinks to the bottom of the pool. Seconds turn into minutes. Police say around 4 minutes until a young girl notices him.
Then we see one of our heroes, a 9-year-old child that has seen some of this, go over to her godmother, come back, and bring her godmother and show her godmother the unresponsive child at the bottom of the pool.
You can see the girl's godmother get into the pool and pull the 2-year-old up, his body looking lifeless. The calls for help begin.
Wait, you messed up your meeting with Holiday Express? Did you ever tell a child in elemental water?
With police on the way, you can see the frantic efforts to save the little boy. In an incredible twist, there happened to be a nurses' convention going on there. 2 nurses jumped into action with CPR.
It gives you goosebumps when you see these nurses working on this child. Multiple rounds of CPR to bring him back.
Police say those nurses managed to revive that little boy. So where was his mother? Police say she was there at the pool. They have finished their investigation and have turned it over to the prosecutor's office for possible charges.
And be aware, watch people, watch your children.
Police say emergency crews did rush that 2-year-old to the hospital, but he was released the same day. A miracle on a night that could have ended in tragedy.
From the child that identifies the 2-year-old at the bottom of the pool, to the godmother that jumps in, and to the nurses that go into action and do what they're trained to do. They are truly the heroes.
Police tell me that they have nominated those 4 people, those heroes, for the city's
stop.
They
That
was
is-
there at the pool.
I don't know. My husband was helping me put this together. I uploaded a different one where they actually followed this story up with a simulated drowning, and they had a swimming expert in a pool with parents and other people, and she simulated a drowning for like 6 minutes. No one noticed her, but she was in the pool like this. Right, head up, feet down, kind of doing this, and no one noticed, and that was kind of part of what I wanted y'all to see. So I'll have to. But anyway, the big things in that story are how many people were very close proximity to that child and didn't notice anything, didn't hear. And the big thing is in TV, it's always the splashing and yelling. It's not like that in real life. And the fact that CPR was administered so immediately is the only reason that child is still alive, or not in having severe permanent brain damage. And then just how quickly it happened. It was under 4 minutes, and the child floated from the stairs all the way halfway down the side of the pool. So that, I think, that video really has a lot in there. Drowning is silent. Half of children that drown are less than 25 yards away from an adult. 70% of preschoolers who drown are in the presence or in the care of both one or both of their parents. 69% of drownings happen during non-swim times. That was in the other video. It happens quickly, 20 to 60 seconds for submersion, 1 to 2 minutes, they're unconscious. That's probably the big one. When they're unconscious, their throat's going to open up, their lungs are going to open up, and then the water begins to fill up their lungs. And 4 to 6 minutes, they suffer permanent brain damage. 23% of drownings happen during a family gathering at a pool. And so many times it's a transition time. Like the kids get out to eat, and you take the flotation device off the child, and then they eat, and they sneak back in the water. When I was training, I had a mom come, and she said that exact same thing had happened. The husband was in the pool with the child, handed the daughter off to the mom. She ate. She snuck back into the water. Mom and dad were visiting over dinner, and she was skilled, so she got in her float. And one of the people at the family gathering said, "Hey, is this your daughter? She's crying for her dad." Like she was in the pool in her float. But had she not been skilled, like her mom was like, just saying, "I'm just so grateful we did this." Like she wouldn't be here. Like we had no idea she'd gotten back in the pool. So boys drown at 2 times the rate of girls. Children with autism are 160 times more likely to drown. They're very much at risk. And it's one thing we are able to, I've worked with several autistic kids, and they can learn. They can learn to turn to float. They can learn to swim. Very much a needed skill for them. And most drownings are preventable. But no child's drown proof, right? If a child hits their head going into the water and they're unconscious, they're not going to be able to use their skills. So, it's still super important that we're watching, that we have, that we're vigilant around the water. But at the same time, the vast majority of the kids that drown, there are things that, would have prevented if they were in place. Infants most likely typically drown in bathtubs and buckets. When we lived in Arizona, a child was reaching into a bucket, went headfirst into the bucket, and drowned upside down in a bucket. So if you've got buckets outside, like if there's any kind of buckets or like anything that would collect water in your backyard, like put it upside down or put it away. be aware. It's something you don't really think about, but it's definitely a danger. Toddlers, it's almost always residential pools, and teens, it's lakes and rivers. It's more open water and kind of more active types of situations. Bath time, obviously don't ever leave your child alone in the tub. The gal that skilled me, that trained me as an ISR instructor, she had boy-girl twins just like me, and her daughter drowned in the bathtub. She went to check on something on the stove, and she said she knew how to stand up. So she was perplexed as to why, like, if she fell in the water that she wouldn't have just stood up. But her daughter drowned in the bathtub with her twin brother in there. Eyes on, phones off. Always check the temperature of the water, like especially if you're traveling, because hot water heaters are always set at different temperatures, so that's important. Clearing the area of electric appliances. Non-slip stuff in tubs is great. Again, if a child falls and slips and hits their head, that's a whole different. And then obviously a toilet's got water in it. It's just you can keep the lid closed. That's one less thing they get into. Pool safety. If a child's missing, check the water first. If there's water in the area, check the water first, because seconds count. Like if they're in their room and you find them, that's or hiding in the closet or whatever. But check the water first. I actually had a student, a 3-year-old. I was swimming an infant, and the 3-year-old slipped out of the pool area where the mom and I were. Mom didn't notice, and I'm like, is she in the bathroom? And she's like, I don't know. Like, she went to find her and she was missing. And so first thing I did was check the deep end, like to see if she had, jumped in and we didn't hear her. She was playing hide and seek behind the couch, and, but she's perfectly fine there. Had she been in the deep end, right? And we're looking all over the house, so check water first. Periodically test your fence and self-closing gates. My oldest child, we had a pool, it was in the corner of the yard. We were out playing on the playground, which was on the opposite side of the yard. I went in the house to get something, was on the phone, looked up, and our daughter was walking around the pool deck inside the fence. I'm fully convinced that if we had used flotation devices with her, she probably would have been in the water. I would not have been able to see her in the water. I could see her because she was walking around. And 2, I would have never in a million years thought to check the pool, because it had a fence, and my husband had checked the chemicals in the morning to check the chlorine levels, and the gate didn't snap shut. And so she walked all the way over. We weren't anywhere near the pool, weren't talking about swimming, nothing. 2 years old, she walked all the way across the yard and pulled on the gate for whatever reason and got in. So kids are drawn to water, they're curious about it, and they will, even if you think, so just that self-closing gate, it needs to be reliable. 23% of drownings happen when there is a pool barrier, and, it's not, something has gone awry with it. And checking for barrier breaches, either disrepair, climbing. My 4-year-old was stacking stuff up and opening up the gate because she figured out to get in the pool. So toys also entice kids towards water. So picking up the toys around. I've had a student that went in on their tricycle. She's trucking around on her tricycle on the deck and got a little too close to the pool and ended up in the water. Water level at the uppermost point, if you can. We are self-fill so that it stays as high as it possibly can. Emergency phone nearby with the address on, know what the address is, so that if there's emergency, somebody has an accurate address to be able to give the EMS. And then assigning a pool watcher. The first video you saw, the first thing, within 2 weeks of her son drowning, she had developed an organization called Levi's Legacy. And you go to levislegacy.com and you can order what's called Water Guardian tags. And it basically, you would have it at a pool party and you would hand it to every 15 minutes, a different adult would be responsible to kind of have their eyes on the pool and be kind of vigilant of the water, kind of be preoccupied with that. I always recommend to my swim families, if they're having a pool party at their house, that they hire a lifeguard too, a teenage lifeguard, and make sure they don't have their phone on, that they're not the one with the phone. And have somebody that's assigned to the water, especially during a family event where there's transitions and food and a lot of people and activities. Open water, just be aware that it's fast moving and it's dark and can be very dangerous. Checking weather conditions, Coast Guard life jackets that are approved. Really check with your kids. If you're going to be at the open water, you're going to be at the beach, they need a life jacket on, but it needs to be an appropriate size, and like check their weight, check their size, and test the life jacket. I encourage all my families to bring it with them to when they're at the pool with me, and we test them. We put them in and make sure it needs to put them on their back. Hyperlight is typically a good brand for a life jacket, or if you go to a boating, any kind of a boating store, they're going to have a super great quality life jacket that's going to put the child on their back. But you want something that's going to put their child on their back. There's a lot of flotation devices out right now where the kid can get stuck face in because they're for snorkeling or they're for other purposes. So you really do want to test it and make sure it puts them on their back. Know where the lifeguard stand is, and bright colored suits is a big one. No blue, no green. Like you don't see it in the water. So pick neon colors, really bright colors, and maybe have one suit that you use for the beach or lake, open water places. That's not going to get faded if you have a pool or you're at the pool a lot. So that you have one that's like super bright and for open water. And then teaching older kids, like as your kids get older, they still need to know like how to handle a rip current, that you swim parallel against the shore until the rip current lets them go. So, even skilled swimmers drown at beaches and if they get caught in that. So teaching them about the water, teaching them to swim sideways until, that current lets them out is important. And always floating, like even adults or kids that they know how to float, so that if they get themselves in trouble or they're tired, they can turn on their back. Even if they can only do it for a few seconds and they have to turn and swim and then get back in their float. But having that floating skill is, when we were growing up, it was all about what do you call it? Treading water. Well, that's great, but when you got tired, you're vertical and you don't have any options. So one of the things I love is that teaching kids to float is something that they're not going to get tired. That's not, and it doesn't require coordination and strength and all of that treading water used to. Teaching them respect for the water. And if you take away anything from this talk, it's the first point: have the right mindset about water, right? Because of what I do, and obviously I'm exposed to a lot of tragic stories, more so than y'all are probably on a daily basis, but the water is not a playground, and the pool is not a playground if your child isn't skilled. If your child isn't skilled, that is the leading cause of death for preschoolers. And so just be mindful of the fact that how you're presenting the water to your child in terms of yes, it's a fun place to play if they know how to manage the water, but if not, it's not, teaching them. And so with that, young or unskilled kids should never be in the water without an adult. Teaching them to ask permission before they get in the water is a great thing to do. Allowing them to experience the nature of the water. A lot of the kids that come to me that are a little bit older have been in flotation devices for years. I had a student walk up to the pool deck on day one, marched up. His mom had two little active boys. She's got her swim bag. She's trying to get in. We're walking up to the pool. Her son walks up, jumps in, and sunk straight to the bottom. And his eyes got as big as a saucer. And I grabbed him up, I looked at the mom, and I said, "You're in the right place." And he's a fish now. But the water didn't do what he expected it to do. His experience with water his whole life had been, I jump in and I pop up and float. Yeah. And he sunk to the bottom. And so the water didn't do what he, and it shocked him. You could just see his face is just even if if for whatever reason you choose not to do any kind of a survival swim lesson, at least put your kids in the water. Let them experience that they can't breathe, that they don't float. Give them a little bit of an experience with what the real environment is, and then they should have an accurate knowledge of their skills, and we'll talk about that later as well. And then just age appropriate talks about the differences between pools and open waters. Like as your kids get older, just reminding them that there are dangers that are unique to lakes and rivers, so that as they get older, they don't, they might be very confident in their swim skills, but layers of protection, constant supervision, obviously, having a water guardian, cell phones nearby, and staying within an arm's length of your child, being in the pool with them. Protecting access to the outside. You can get locks, high up on the doors. You can have alarms on the doors. There's also alarms that you can get that float in the pool. So if for some reason you can't fence your pool or you don't want to, there are some high-tech alarms that can float in the pool surface and will detect, someone breaking the surface of the water. And then doggy doors. When I was training, one of the moms had lost a younger child to, they were at a baby shower, and they had put all the kids to watch a movie in the master bedroom, and they were all watching a Disney movie, and her infant crawled out the doggy door and crawled into the water. And so doggy doors are kind of something you don't really think about, but the kids, those are fun things to crawl through. So be mindful of that especially if you're visiting another, somebody else. And then pool barriers, 4 feet high pools or fences with self-latching gates, or a net cover. There's net covers you can get. You just have to be very vigilant that you're securing it every time you get in and out of the pool. I'm not sure I would be good at doing that. Survival swim, not all swim lessons are the same, I'll talk about that a little at the end. But what I would say about the lessons is those go with your child. So Bodie Miller, they're in the news all the time. They lost a child to drowning. Their pool is fully fenced. They were the neighbors, and the neighbors had an unsecured pool. And same story as Levi. She was playing with them in the TV room. The moms were having coffee. The boys were in another room. She left the room. They assumed she was just going to play with the boys. She slipped outside and ended up in the water, likely because of a puddle jumper history, which I'll address that in a minute. And then knowing CPR. Obviously, that child at the hotel pool was those nurses, absolutely. Knowing CPR saved him. So puddle jumpers. So I'm talking about the things that they put on their things. They're promoted as being, so this ad is Amazon, and it says, for beginning swimmers, for toddlers, float in the pool, the kids feel happy and stay safe while the parents enjoy peace of mind. Learn to swim easily. The pool floaties for kids are designed to teach them balance in the water, to stay on the surface, and to start swimming on their own. And it gives them confidence and freedom when playing around the water. These things hold the child in this position in the water. They're vertical, their heads up, they're kicking, and they think they're swimming. So the truth with these things, the truth about them is that they hold the child in drowning position. They give the child a false security that they're swimming. The kids think they're swimming. They change the water environment, right? The water is a safe, fun place because they're floating around on the surface. Honestly, a lot of times they're used so that the parents don't have to get in, right? The kids are in the floaties and they're, having a great time in the pool and splashing around, and mom can sit poolside and visit, and, she has the freedom to do what she wants to do. But what that communicates to the child is it's okay to be in the water without an adult. It's okay to be in the water alone. Like, you're in the water, I'm not. And so, not a great message. And then from an instructor standpoint, when we get a child that's been in puddle jumpers for a long time, it does not help them learn how to to swim. They struggle with keeping their head down in the water, because, and that's, to swim, you have to have your face down in the water. And they struggle with that because they're used to having their face out of the water. They're used to swimming with their mouth open. So getting them to close their mouth is super hard. They're felt secure in those things. They absolutely feel secure in those things. Unfortunately, though, when you take them off, they feel super insecure. And so it takes them a whole lot longer to get kids secure in their skills, because they're just so nervous in the water because they don't have those things on. And so, and they kick like they're on a bicycle. Like, when they're in those things, they're kind of kicking, their feet are kind of moving like they're on a bicycle. And those types of kicks are not what you use for swimming. And so then when they kick like that, when they're first learning to swim, their feet drop all the time, and it kind of sinks them down into a more vertical posture again. Because, as they're going along, they're kind of trying to keep their head down, but their head's kind of up, and they're kicking this way, kind of tucking their legs in, and that drops that bottom down, and then their head's coming up. And so that, some of the kids, some kids transition out of these, and, I'm not going to say every child, but the vast majority of the toddlers that have a pool where they've spent hours and hours and hours in these really struggle with lessons. And they have a hard time transitioning. It does not help a child learn to swim. That is absolutely ridiculous. Just swim lessons are not all the same. I would say, the number one thing is, if your child doesn't learn how to turn and find air. Swimming is not important so much as learning to breathe in the water. And so that would be the number one skill they need, even over swimming. What independent skill is your child going to have when they finish the session of whatever lessons you're looking at? Like, what independent skill are they going to have? And how long is it going to take to get that skill? And when they finish, are they still requiring any kind of aid or help? What if your child found the water alone? Would they be able to take care of themselves? And then, just in terms of cost, I get feedback sometimes. People will say, "Oh, my friend's like, oh, it's just so expensive." And what I've heard over and over and over from parents that have come from swim schools like Goldfish, Pengu, and the local swim schools, is their child's been in those programs for 6, 8, 12. I had a mom last summer who brought her 4-year-old. He'd been there in the swim school since he was 8 months old, and so she's probably paying in a month what my students are paying for a week, but she'd been paying that for like months and months and months. She looked at me on Thursday of week 1 and said, "My son has learned more in lessons with you in 4 days than he learned in 4 years." So, and they're frustrated at how much money they've spent and their child isn't progressing and isn't skilled, because it's group lessons and there's no individual work, and there's just a lot of differences. And it being once a week, so you're paying for 30 minutes, but kids are often like hanging on the side of the pool for 25 minutes of that. There's just a lot of difference. So just understand what you're paying for. You shouldn't be paying for time. It's the amount of time the child spends in the water is immaterial. It's what skill are they learning. So just, as you look at stuff and compare, that's really what you want to focus on is, could they get themselves on their back and float if they needed to? And then I just brought some sample videos for you to see what the kids can do. It's pretty amazing. And am I doing okay on time? Are we? You want to play that? These are short clips. So this is an infant. I want to say he's 8-10 months.